See, and here was me think, and here was me thinking that it being the first talk after lunch, I'd be stood around here for 5 minutes going, let's wait for the other 3/4 of the audience to turn up. And okay, we've got a couple of people coming in, but wow, you guys are actually prompt. Maybe the lunch break was long enough for once this year. Anyway, this is Distributed Demon Discovery. Should be good fun. So, before I get on to the actual content, I need to take a brief pause to do a little bit of gratitude. Because I'm here on behalf of Shadowcat, and number one, Mark actually organised me to be here. He being our token organised person and business person and finance person and legal person and the person who talks to non-technical managers because it's not safe to let me talk to them. Possibly. But this talk is also on behalf of socialflow.com, who are a Shadowcat customer and have been for quite a while, who we've been helping out improving their usage of the sort of Catalyst, DBIX class, Moose ecosystem, doing various other bits and pieces, and have been kind enough to fund and still agree to open source quite a lot of the code that's going to be behind this. One of the reasons I needed to thank Mark is that there were a couple of bits that I didn't really feel I could quite justify billing the customer for. So I spent several days not logging any billable hours while I built them anyway because not having them was irritating me. And obviously Mark was hugely impressed by that but didn't actually kill me. So always nice to have an understanding business guy. Anyway. And I also want to make a point of saying thank you to Phelan, who's the member of my team who did most of the heavy lifting and quite a lot of the relevant cursing in order to get this all working together. And then I'm the one who gets to come out to America, drink beer with you wonderful people and take all the glory for it. So, great bloke. Has an amazing capacity to turn my half-formed and possibly still half-arsed ideas into really solid working code, a fair chunk of which we're hopefully going to see in the course of this. So basically the summary is thank you to all of the above people for putting up with me and being sufficiently awesome that between them I get to be here and actually have something to talk about. Anyway, so Distributed Demon Discovery. What? Okay. Lovely alliterative title, but okay, what does that actually mean? So the basic problem, and it's a problem that we run into with time after time with pretty much every customer that we're dealing with, and that I see time after time out in the community when I'm helping people with stuff. Insufficiently automated infrastructure, because fundamentally, all infrastructure is insufficiently automated because there's always things that you're doing by hand that are boring. And that the theory is always once is accident, twice is coincidence, 3 times automated. But you don't always quite have time to do it. And startup clients especially suffer from that because they have a certain amount of funding and a runway, and they need to get stuff out the door. They need to get stuff shipped. So, you know, if the choice is between doing it right and doing it fast enough to get cash flow positive before your investors lose their temper, the answer is you do it the way that works. You do it the way that makes the people happy to pay for it. Because as long as your customers are happy, they don't really care just how much you hate your own current deployment. And you know, the traditional thing, you learn, so even if it was perfect to you 6 months ago, after you've spent 6 months learning new stuff, you're going to hate it anyway, right? We've all been there. But serious, one of the things I often encounter is people getting embarrassed about this thing. They're like, oh, but it's kind of ugly, you're going to hate this, Matt. Well, I might kind of hate looking at it, but the fact that this code is useful enough to enough people to generate enough money that you're bringing Shadowcat into this to make it better, I can't really argue, can I? And anyway, shipping is always feature zero. If you haven't shipped it, it doesn't matter how beautiful it is. It doesn't matter how clean it is. If it ain't shipped, it ain't worth anything. Not well, I mean, it might be to us, and that's cool for a weekend project, but, you know, out in the real world where people's mortgages are being paid, shipping is feature zero, and it has to happen. And that means that you always have insufficiently automated infrastructure. So, okay, what's the first step to try and move your infrastructure a decent amount towards sufficiently automated? Well, the first step is to recognize that if it's insufficiently automated, it's almost certainly also insufficiently documented. Because again, you can never have enough documentation. Which is a problem that we solved on DBIX class by acquiring Jez Robinson, a fantastic documentation lead who did a huge amount of work, and a problem we're slowly starting to solve for Shadowcat customers by the fact that while I wasn't looking, Mark managed to talk Jez Robinson into working for us. So she's now doing the same Translate MST into sane English documentation work for customers that she's done for DBIX class for 6 years. And my God, it's nice. People actually understand the stuff she writes. Anyway, so your first step is building up that big picture, yeah? So what's the usual way that you go about this? Well, the way that people generally go is, right, we need to build up a big picture, so we need to carve out some time, and what we'll do is we'll log into the systems, and then we'll go and we'll have a look around, and we'll figure out what's running where, and what it's doing and why it needs to be there. And then we'll document that up probably onto a wiki somewhere, probably MediaWiki, because the Perl community seems to be constitutionally incapable of writing a wiki that isn't actually more hateful. Scrotty, yours is really pretty, but I have looked at the source code and it did take me 4 beers before the bleeding stopped. And eventually, the idea is that from that process, you reach a point where you can try and unify that documentation into a proper sort of big picture of your infrastructure. Okay, but we're kind of missing a point here, aren't we? Humans are kind of fallible doing this stuff, yeah? Especially since going through a server and trying to figure out where everything's running. It's so easy to miss something. You miss that an init script isn't symlinked into the right directory. You miss that a service is running a slightly patched version of something because production fell over at 3 in the morning. So you went in there and you patched it, and then you went, right, tomorrow I'll document this up and I'll get it committed properly, and you get in tomorrow and there's something else and you forget, right? This always happens. And yet the problem we're trying to solve here is that things are insufficiently automated, and that's bad because humans are fallible. Why do we keep taking a manual solution to a manual problem? The whole point is we're trying to... Automation is the name of the game here. Why aren't we automating the first step as well? Really, it makes no sense. So... all right, well, what else do we do? Well, yeah, we can write code to find all this stuff out for us, right? Obviously, I mean, that's a simple matter of programming, and that's way more fun than digging around on servers, pretending you're frickin' Tony Robinson out of, you know, Time Team for Unix. But, hang on, we're back to, how do you actually get that onto the remote machines in the first place is your first problem, yeah? Because part of the point of here is you're often in a situation where you don't have fully automated deployment, and that's one of the things you're trying to solve, because you're trying to be dead sure about what's already deployed, so you know that your new deployment automation configuration is going to be sane. Oh, help, loop of derp. What do we do? Okay, well, so in the traditional spirit of, automation is like violence. If it isn't working for you, you're not using enough. So scrabble around for plan B. Aha! What we have is Object Remote, which is the guts of what will eventually get built on top of it, the next version of the TAC project that my abstract apparently claimed I was talking about, but I applied shipping is feature 0 to the actual stuff that the customer needed, given they were kind enough to pay for the development. But, it's kind of only fair, right? So Object Remote is going to be the guts of the next version of TAC, but it turns out that you can quite happily use that on its own. And so I call Object Remote Arrow Connect, give it a host name. It goes and SSHs into there, and it gives me back a connection object. And then I can call on any class, new : on, and have that connection object. And that's going to give me back a proxy object to an instance of that class on the far machine. And happily, Object Remote ships the class over the wire for me. So in the whole of this process, I've installed all of this code on the ops server that we're running all of the introspection cron jobs from. But I've never actually had to install anything on the far end machines. The only thing they need to have is an SSH account and a Perl binary that's at least 5.8.1. For preference, 5.8.1 are not produced by Red Hat. But in the case of SocialFlow, a couple of their very early employees had actually used Red Hat, so their infrastructure's all Debian. And hey, we've almost retired MySQL as well. Anyway, so installation isn't required. So that solves that. So I can get the code out onto these machines and run it. Great. I would love to go into the details of Object Remote, but I've only got a 40-minute slot, and I've got all sorts of cool stuff that everybody else wrote that I want to cover. So Object Remote being my pet bag of crazy, I'll be covering that in my lightning talk later. Okay, so we can run the code. Great. Well, what do we do with the output? So what's the normal thing? Okay, I've got a load of data that I'm going to want to store, and I'm going to want to deal with aggregating it and querying it. So a database. Okay, I love Postgres. Most of our customers have grown to love Postgres as well. On the principle, you may have heard me yesterday saying it's really nice not to have to be scared of joins. I'm really not joking. But the thing is, we're going to be adding new probes all the time, because as soon as we spot something that isn't covered by this, the idea is we should be writing one quick module that introspects it, and then just having it going over the wire. So having a fixed database schema is going to start complicating things. So anytime I start talking about this, somebody without a sense of self-preservation immediately goes, Matt, why don't you use MongoDB? Yes. But the thing is, part of the point here is we don't have everything fully automated yet, right? So I'm trying to minimize the amount of configuration required to get this whole thing going, because I don't want to be doing any more manual configuration. That's what this is supposed to help me solve, yeah? And the thing about MongoDB is, it's not just world writable by default, it's internet writable by default. You have to mess around with either firewalling or careful configuration to have it not accept any connection from any IP address in the entire world and give you full write access to the production data and the ability to delete it all. Which, I mean, that's not just internet writable by default, that's Goatsy by default, guys. Which seems to be a common feature of NoSQL stuff. I guess being web scale, they duplicate the most famous part of the web, yeah? Anyway, more importantly, this stuff is meant to be dealt with, be used by operations people. and by system staff. Yes, you will be amazed to hear Social Flow actually have management sufficiently clueful that in spite of being a funded startup in the Web 2.0 space, they have hired a systems administrator. Man, I'm proud of them. I think that may be the first time that's ever happened. Anyway, so I want to be able to grep stuff, yeah? Need to be, well, I want to be able to just, you know, throw some shell scripting at it to try and get data out. Throw random maps and greps in Perl code at it to get data out. I don't want to be going, oh, well, all you need to do is connect to this TCP port and talk this packed binary JSON rubbish on the what. By this point, I could have written a shell script. Damn it, I could just have invoked a copy of ACK and it would have already given me the answer if I had them in files. And then, so I was going along these thought processes. Something else occurred to me. Given we're going to want to collect data and map what's going on with these machines over time, I'm going to want to be able to get sort of, you know, when a package upgrade has happened, I want to be able to say, what packages do I have now? What did I have before? What's changed? Now, I do believe we have a name for that, don't we? It's called diff. So it suddenly occurred to me that the ultimate database store for this process would be the second project that Linus Torvalds named after himself. I'm still annoyed with him over that one. He's taken about the only sufficiently obnoxious polite word left for the software name. I'm going to have to figure out a workaround for that later. Anyway. If somebody's going to be better than me in a way that irritates me, it being Linus Torvalds makes it slightly less upsetting, though. You've got to admit, you know. And also, I don't want to figure out a data storage for it. So what about using JSON and Git? I mean, you know, at the end of the day, JSON is your go-to. This is just a bunch of basically somewhat structured data. I mean, it's so commonly and widely used that even MongoDB figured out it was a good idea. But you do run into this small problem with JSON, which is the trailing commas. Why did you have to design it like that? Why did you have to define it so if I leave a trailing comma inside a hash, it blows up and won't parse it? Why did you do this to me? However, fortunately, it turns out there are a fair number of other people who feel the same way when they're writing JSON by hand. So the JSON module provides a method called relaxed, which is absolutely fantastic. Possibly doesn't describe the author of, say, JSON XS, but that's another story. But we also had this slight problem of, okay, but none of the producers will write it with the trailing comma, because, you know, that's an error. Well, it's an error we want to make, because I want the diffs to look good. So I went back to Social Flow. I went, pretty please, can we research a way of fixing this? Because I really don't want to have to use YAML. Because YAML. If I need to say more than that, you haven't used it yet, and you lucky people, right? And so I got approval for a couple of hours of research time, and Phelan got back to me an hour and a half later and said, well, you don't need to ask for production time, I've implemented it. Which is why I have the slide at the start saying thank you, you know? It kind of makes me happy. So, okay, so now we write to files and we're going to snapshot trees. So that all seems pretty easy, yeah? Snapshot to trees of files, and then we need a way to interrogate it. So, okay, we can interrogate it with GRET, we can interrogate it with quick one-off Perl scripts and decode JSON. And for having a quick look around and poking at stuff, we'd snapshot it into the Git, and then I've thrown together a quick web simple browser, which doesn't actually understand the data at all, but knows just enough about what sort of structures we use in JSON that it's able to make a pretty good go at doing it. It's not a 100% good go yet. That's because I'm lame and had to actually write some slides for this talk as well as fixing bugs. But anyway, so I will show you all that in a moment. However, first, I would like to take a small detour, which is the one thing I wanted to talk about with respect to Object Remote that won't fit into a lightning talk, which is sudo. Type in sudo. No, it's not. If sudo was as bad as GPG, I'd have delegated this to you like I do all the GPG work we have. The camera didn't pick up that. Piron just gave me the finger, and I don't blame him. Anyway, password prompts. Okay, password prompts. You can say, I don't want you to send the prompt to the TTY, because I probably don't have a TTY, because I'm talking to 27 different hosts at once. And in an infrastructure like this, we probably have the same sudo password on every machine, so I only want to type the thing in once, thank you very much. Part of the point of this is to get enough users and SSH keys set up that I don't have to keep typing this in every day. So sudo minus capital S will accept the password on stdin, and it writes the prompt out to std. So I can just read std to see if it's giving me a prompt, and that's fair enough. And then Object Remote can basically go in both directions. So I use a remote object on the control machine that's being called by the machine calling sudo remotely to send the prompt back to the master. And then I discovered that IO prompter didn't work on every single machine we had. Probably because it's Damien code and therefore contains, well, about your average monthly allowance of crack in every 12 lines. Given the way I code, it's at least my weekly allowance. So I ended up doing something beautifully horrible by just doing system stty minus echo. And that works fine. It's a systems level tool. Occasionally doing the gross and dirty but utterly reliable thing is absolutely the correct answer. And then you check for the correct output, and that's great. Except there is no option to sudo that says, hi, I'm writing a script here. Please send me a line of output that says, I don't need a password prompt. So now the only way you can actually tell that sudo didn't need a password is that your program starts executing. Now when you're trying to isolate the password prompting code from all of the rest of the async code that's reading it, that's a little bit frustrating. So I came up with the world's most, I don't know whether that counts as an elegant solution, but now I can read and look for the go line and then hand control onto the rest of the code, and that works fine. That's worked pretty reliably. Okay, on some systems, sudo prints out a new line before you get the go. On some systems, it doesn't. That's a quick if statement, which Phelan and I both wrote because I forgot to check if he was ahead of me again before fixing the bug myself. And if it gets something it doesn't understand, it goes unexpected line from sudo and bails out. Because when you're trying to be root, you don't really want to continue unless you're absolutely sure what's going on, yeah? And then I got it on a machine that I was doing testing on that I thought was completely pristine. What's going on? Why is this not working? And I log in by hand, start a sudo, and discover that yes, the machine was absolutely pristine, and the unexpected line from sudo was that we trust you have received. I've not fixed that one yet. I SSH'd into all of the testing hosts, sudoed once on them, and just moved on because otherwise I wouldn't have been done in time for the talk. Hi guys, the Social Flow team are watching the live stream. I suck, sorry. I repeat. Anyway, I'm going to show you some code, and I am stunningly impressed by the quality of the wireless, so stunningly impressed that I'm doing something completely insane, which is actually relying on the network connection to show you this. So in about 2 minutes, my connection's going to drop and we're all going to leave early, okay? Start thinking up questions so it looks like it was intentional, please. That's far too small to be remotely useful. Thank you. Can you guys read that? Close enough. This is nothing particularly exciting. This is just tree snapshots, so checks paths, exec skip. We played around with all of the different Perl modules. And when, you know, obviously, I mean, the best thing to use here would be, you know, we want something pure Perl because we want to be able to ship things about over the wire and not worry about excess dependencies. And so we found Git Pure Perl, which looked like it was absolutely perfect, and then we realized it was written using Moose. So it's not actually pure Perl at all. It's got like 5 excess dependencies. And I didn't quite have time to port it to Moose, so we just wrap the blooming thing and call the command, it'll be fine. And the end, it is literally just do an add of everything in a commit. RM if strictly necessary, but pretty much always so far we've been adding probes, not removing them. So that's not really been a problem. And the main chunk of this code is Systems Introspector. And can we actually manage to? Yes, we can. Excellent. Wrong link. So even with a working wireless, the liveware problem happens. You know, this is why we're automating things, yeah? Excellent. No, I just clicked the wrong link again. Sorry, I'm a moron. Right. So the idea here is that you have a top-level gatherer, which fires up object remote, goes onto the file machine, sends it onto there. If necessary, it can detect whether things need sudo, at which point it'll use the bridge, which basically ends up jumping to another machine and then sudoing up. And it's relatively simple stuff. We've got a bunch of utility code that wraps around IPC Open2 and stuff in order to pull, you know, oh, we need to read a directory. Yes, there's a billion modules that do all of this stuff, but it's a question of let's have the smallest thing, because bear in mind, every time we do a run, we're shipping this stuff over the wire. So the code size for once actually does almost kind of matter, although we're still using a fair chunk of CPAN. The really interesting thing is if you look at, is it this one? I think it's this one. Yeah, the handle stuff. We started off with doing open-pipe and managed to find that if a binary didn't exist, which was how we discovered that there's at least one machine that never had the script run on it that installs Lusoff, which is one of those things that's very easy to miss manually and again proves why we need to automate all of this. A piped open, file handle open in Perl on pretty much every version we could find. Somehow on those machines, when the exec failed, the child process carried on, but its $$ was still set to the parent PID. We're just sort of like, well, what the heck have we done here? You know, if you're writing something like Devil Declare, you expect to snap Perl a few times, but not for this, you know. And so we went back and went, okay, new plan, IPC Open2. IPC Open2, and then what we'll do is, to make sure it automatically gets weight pitted, because you've got a file handle's a type glob, which means that it's got a hash slot. So you stick an object in one of the keys of the hash slot that has a destroy method that does the weight pid for the child when the file handle goes out of scope. And then that basically works just as well as open-pipe dash, except for a small amount of extra crack, and then sometime next week one of us is going to try and figure out what the heck is going on and file a Perl bug. At which point I'm sure P5P will go, Matt, you're an idiot. Here's what you should have done and why that didn't work. But yeah, it's the nature of software, right? So you end up with a load of JSON files. So if I click in, pick an example, basic hosting. Oh, well done. Stupid bloody excuse for a web browser. There we are, and that looks absolutely awful and is completely useless. What I'm going to do is, give me one moment. I have this slight problem in that, you know how people go on about backwards compatibility is an impedance to progress? Well, Firefox's wonderful record on backwards compatibility for Zool stuff is an impedance to me being able to run my slide system on one from this century. So anyway, let's look at it on here. And it's nothing clever. The whole point of this is to be nothing clever. You know, I've often, you know, in systems code, you want the stupidest thing possible, because then you end up actually being able to be fairly sure that the problem is the applications developer being a muppet, and you can walk around the desk and slap him, rather than it turning out to be a bug in your code. And that's why I do most of the site visits. So it pulls things like groups, package information, and whatever. This is not particularly exciting, except, look, a trailing comma. Wow, hour and a half to get a trailing comma in order to get sensible diffs out of Git. Yay! Don't you just love writing systems code? So let's see if I can get a slightly better view, because the web viewer is. I'm not sure whether you're going to love this or whether you're going to cry. Because it's 200 lines of Web Simple. Right, is that somewhat legible to some of you? Hopefully. So the lovely thing about Web Simple is, because it's pure PSGI, that viewer I was showing you before isn't Apache. It's just I go, okay, //, load up the Plack app directory and just return it. And Web Simple goes, oh, you gave me a Plack application. I'll just dispatch to that then. Cool, not a problem. It's actually less code than configuring the static plugin of most other frameworks. And I know exactly what it's doing, which is always nice. Filter data if it comes back and throw it through a rendering system. That little specification there is pulling a query parameter out. Hobbs was showing you this in a lightning talk yesterday. But you have the lovely thing of, by sticking an @ sign before the name of the parameter, I say, just always give me an array. I do not want the messing about that comes from CGI-style param methods. I do not want to play the ref $_0 question mark @ $_0. No! Just give me an array. And then we have the hilarity that is HTML tags. That is valid Perl. There is no source filter involved. It's not quite as obvious in there just how insane that is. But the thing is, I don't need a template for this. It's code to just display data. Somebody can stick some CSS on it, but really, are systems administration ops people going to complain that it isn't nicely styled if the data's all there 2 days sooner than it would have been another way? Well, okay, maybe they are, but at that point my response is, well, I'm sure you have somebody in-house with lots of CSS knowledge, and since this is your code, here's a commit bit for them. Please, you know. I actually like things that are unstyled HTML3 style. I actually understand that. MST, unconverged Web 1.0. Terribly sorry, I'm busy writing some code to deploy to production. But yeah, this is again literally, there's a whole set of madness. HTML tags comes with Web Simple. I think it's the only thing that I've ever shown to Damien that resulted in him going, oh, that's kind of clever. But it doesn't break nearly as much as everything else I've ever heard him say that about, so it's all okay. But the point is that there's no special logic in here. All it's doing is looking at those JSON files. So if I go on an exploring mission, I can go, okay, let's have groups.json, click into the groups, and we get name group and what users are in it. In a not particularly exciting HTML table, but it's good enough to read. Nagios stuff, I'm not sure how much Nagios config is on here. I'm also not sure if this isn't going to turn out to be one of the things that I didn't manage to make work right. Oh, no, we appear to have Nagios information, which is reasonably handy. One of the interesting things that we've done is actually gone through and not only grabbed all of the information out of apt about what's installed and what could be upgraded. So we've got what all of the packages on the system are. But we've also got a probe that does a locate and finds all of the Git repositories on the machine, which means you can go and go, okay, what applications have we got deployed where? What's the Git config for this one? At which point we can pull out what revision we're at, which remote repository is, so we can match up stuff that's been deployed by doing a git checkout, throwing an it script on and go for it, which I'm not necessarily that fond of as a deployment strategy, but it beats not having a deployment strategy by quite a long way. And now at this point we can go and find out exactly what's running on what system fairly easily. But the fun one, which is powered by this bit, which is possibly the strangest piece of code in here. Basically, if it detects multiple hosts separated by a plus at the start, it goes and grabs the first host. If it's still part of a drill down, it just gives you the drill down. So going down here, if we go into users, for example, pulling, say, group information, that's drill down stuff. But so this is just drill down. But as soon as you get to a table, watch this. Select both of them, multiply. And I forgot a slash on the end of the URL. Excellent, I'm an idiot. That's all right. In the spirit of I did a live demo, there's only one possible thing to do, isn't there? And it being web simple, can we? Yeah, we can mostly see this. Yeah, where's the for Pete's sake? There we go. Ha! Give me huge. There we go. And I can actually test it by doing. And of course the X term's gone off the top of the screen because I'm a moron. JT asked me to submit Perl in action. He got Perl in action. Idiocy on my part and all. Terribly sorry. Going to have to quote that or it's going to get upset. Still giving me the wrong bloody... That's because I'm an idiot. There we go. That looks more like it, doesn't it? So now, since a Web Simple app is not only valid that way, but also as a PSGI app, I can try and run it with Starman and forget that I need a custom port specifier. There we go. See, this is why I don't do live demos normally. I look so much less stupid with pre-prepared slides. Anyway, go back to the start. Multiply. Works this time. Excellent. we go into packages, it's doing the drill down normally, but now if I hit installed, I'm going to get name of package on one and the versions on the two machines. So I can now compare this and go, well, most of these are pretty much the same. apt is a slightly different version, but we can also, by paging down, because it merges both, see the packages that are installed on one machine and not on the other. Which in fact, I wouldn't be surprised if at this point the people looking at the stream are going, maybe I need to pull up that URL and figure out why the dev and the prod version of this have got different things installed, which is the entire point of the exercise. And as I say, this is purely just going, do I have a hash in the JSON, do I have an array in the JSON? It doesn't actually have any comprehension of the content. So if I go back down, one of the things it does, which will hopefully work, is we've now got users and we can check the group IDs and all of the usernames, see which ones are on there and which ones aren't. Oh, excellent! They added Castaway to the production box, but not the development box. That's going to be great for the documentation effort. Presumably I forgot to ask for the account on that. That one's almost certainly my fault. But the other thing is, it still keeps a single version of the links that are drill down. So if I now do explore groups, I still end up with a sensible group output. And that's basically, all of these repositories are currently in git.shadowcat.co.uk because under the circumstances it struck me it might be a little bit churlish for us to ask them to spend time and money setting up a public Git system when they just spent all this time and money actually having the code built to go into it. So I volunteered the use of ours. It seemed only fair. So if you go into git.shadowcat.co.uk, you can find all of the code that's involved in this. It is all going to be Perl licensed. We've remembered to commit a sponsored by Socialflow notice to most of it. Before it goes to CPAN, it's going to get proper copyright notices and actually some documentation. I think about 2/3 of the stuff that Phelan's written is already documented. And about none of the stuff that I've written is already documented. See my previous comments. But I think this is going to turn out to be a really useful thing, because actually knowing where you're up to and being able to browse it. And if you need another probe for something that's basic to your environment, all you're looking at doing is writing a simple moo class that returns a hash ref. The hash ref goes into JSON, the JSON goes into the Git repository, and the browser just goes, oh hey, it's another JSON file, I can browse that. If any of you decide to have a play with it before we manage to CPAN it and sort out IRC channels and stuff, please come and bug me, because I would love to have some people helping with this and contributing to this, because the idea that quite a few of you might find this useful and thereby want to contribute is basically the argument I made to talk the wonderful people at Socialflow into sponsoring most of it. So if you could help me not be a liar to my customer, that would be really nice. And if you can get some useful use out of this software at the same time, that's going to be even cooler. And yeah, that's pretty much it. We have about 5 minutes left on the slot, so thank you very much, and any questions? Go on.
I believe that there's a no password option for the pseudo-words list. Did you consider that?
There absolutely is. And when you're in the situation of an insufficiently automated infrastructure, how exactly do you get to being root in order to add the no password option to your sudo config? That's why I had to write the prompt stuff. Good point. Well made. Works great on sufficiently automated infrastructures. Guess what everybody else, guess what the real world does to me? Oh, go on.
Yes, you had some links in the data document, right, for the users. The users list you had open, right? On the far right.
Yeah, just a second. Let me just pull it down to being one system, because then I can actually see the table.
Right, there's a bunch of links there with data. Are those links in the JSON then, or?
No, what they are is if there's a key in the JSON where the value is a hash, then it makes a link that then goes and displays the contents of that hash. Yeah, it's pure drill down.
I thought I saw some recursion in it earlier today, but I wasn't really sure. I wasn't cascading.
Cheers. Yeah, I'm being asked about Grid Machine, which I will pull up on screen for you. Well, that's Grid : Machine, not... Sorry, it's going to be easier to answer. Ah, there we go. The answer is, The answer is that this stuff is sending code across via eval over the top in the IPC Perl SSH style, which is very, very cool. But I'd just like to, I don't see anything in here talking about being able to automatically send all of the dependencies of your code over the wire recursively, which is what I wrote Object Remote to do. Yeah, here we go. What it appears to be doing is it sends a hard-coded list of objects over the wire. And what I'm doing is I squirt a Fatpack bootstrap and then pull in anything and everything else you need on demand. So long as it's installed locally, I don't have to reference it again. It sticks a code ref in @inc that goes and figures it out. Anybody else? Oh.
What about access modules? Do those go across at all, or does it all have to be GoPro?
XS modules do not, because Perl provides lovely mechanisms involving @inc and stuff, and of course there's @fatpacker to get the initial bootstrap, which is what CPAN- uses, which makes handling pure Perl stuff very nice and easy. If it's an XS module, in order to produce the equivalent, you would basically have to figure out how to wrap the linker, which is going to start getting very operating system and environment specific. And given this is designed to be usable in heterogeneous, potentially semi-hostile environments, the answer is basically just to go for a pure Perl stack all the way down. And most of the relevant tools that you're going to want for systems introspection are pure Perl anyway. At the point at which you need an XS module, I've not yet been in a situation where the reason I wanted an XS module on the machine, like say a DBD, hadn't already resulted in that XS module already being installed for me. The only kind of limitation here is it means that I'm always using Moo rather than Moose, but that's not that big a deal for this level of code. Because at the point at which you start using features that are in Moose but not in Moo, you kind of want to be repeating to yourself, "This is systems. You appear to be trying to be clever. Please stop." Anybody who's ever carried a pager knows why you need to repeat that to yourself all the time in such things. I do love the amount of clever that Moose gives me. That's why if you load Moose into a process with Moo classes in, all of the Moo classes suddenly appear to have been Moose classes all along. So I can take advantage of all of Stephen Little's clever and the times I need it, and get my Pure Pearl fat pack ability and shippable over the wire the rest of the time. It's been a pretty good compromise so far. One other counter argument, which is the reason that Fat Packer doesn't support XS. You take something that does what Fat Packer does, if you try and make it support XS, allow me to tell you what happens. What happens is PAR. No. PAR is insane baroque, and I love it dearly for the fact that it works at all. But you know, that was about a year's worth of ordery crazy that made it work at all. I don't feel like trying to duplicate a year's worth of ordery crazy to end up with something that probably doesn't work as well as PAR already does. If you want to send me a patch to have Object Remote be able to automatically use a PAR you prepared earlier, I'd be totally happy to accept that. You're handling the support questions for it, though. Yeah, but, at some point you have to compromise in order, you know. At this stage, I've worked on 2 web frameworks, 2 or 3 templating systems, 1.5 ORMs, which is probably going to be 2.5 at some point in the next year or two. One object system, what few sandpoints I have left, I need to keep, okay? If Cthulhu eats my brain, I won't be at the next year's Yapsy, right? But yeah, fair point, and it's slightly, you know, also the only thing I'm actually good at with C is making it segfault, so even if I believe there was a sensible way of implementing XS for this, I'd suggest somebody else should probably do it. Right, we're pretty much dead out of time, but if anybody's got one last quick one. No? Excellent. Thank you very much.